So good morning. I think we'll go ahead and get started here we do not officially have a quorum for this meeting, so it will be a little bit less formal. We won't do any voting or anything at this point. So welcome to the Ambulance Service Oversight Committee. I am Desi Fleming. I'm the director at Fargo-Cass Public Health. Chief Dirksen is on vacation today, so I am sitting in for him as chair. So any announcements anyone has? None? Okay. And the minutes from the May 10th are in your packets, so we can, I'm sure you've reviewed those. If anyone has questions, we can certainly entertain those. Otherwise, like I said, we won't be doing any approving at this meeting. We'll have to save that for next time when we have a quorum. Any questions on the minutes from May 10th or any corrections? Okay, hearing none. Data review is our next agenda item.
All right, I believe everybody got the data yesterday emailed out, but no real big changes in the data. There was May and June were a little bit trended below last year's volumes. July was our busiest month that we've had yet to date as far as City of Fargo calls. So we had 1,290 911 calls in July. The new graphs that were introduced at last meeting as far as the top 5 clinical impressions and the destination decision choices are also in for each of those months. Only real big one was in July. Cardiac or chest pain, excuse me, came up into the top 5 clinical impressions. So it was a busy month from that aspect, but other than that, from the clinical standpoint, not operational or response times yet. Those are those numbers, so if there's any questions or clarifications, I guess I can provide that.
Did you say, Jason, the volumes are actually down in this July versus last?
I'm sorry, May and June.
May and June.
Were down
okay.
compared to last year, but July was the busiest month that we've had on record since this committee was established. That was up at 1,290 calls.
Gotcha.
For 911 responses within the city.
I received, and I'm not sure where, I don't know who provided it to me, but there was, now that we have that mobile unit for detox.
Yep.
I know that that's impacted some of our business or trips, might as well call it that. I mean, just number of calls, but that's to me a very positive trend. Yep. We want that.
And I think it's also impacted police and fire as well, but there again,
that's what we want.
A lower level of response, it's
Yep.
less money, it's less resources that are coming. So yeah, and I think the guests and people that they are serving, I think sometimes respond better to that lower level of intervention
sure.
rather than everyone
I think in EMS, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, what we want to do is have those ambulances available for the highest acuity calls and being called for someone who may need detox services, for example, if they're medically stable, that is a good use of a mobile detox unit where it's really, if we're tying up an ambulance to do that type of work, when somebody's having chest pain, I mean, it's clear that that's an imbalance. So I don't know if you have any.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
It's a better use of resources.
And we have in the last several months, of course, kind of extended that time. You know, it used to be 8-hour coverage for mobile outreach. Now it's 16. So
that's good.
It will serve its purpose well, I think. So I have a question just on the canceled ones.
Yep.
Are those like canceled before anyone leaves anywhere, or canceled en route, or is it kind of a mix of everything?
Anything so if there's patient contact, that would come in one of the other categories.
Okay.
So the canceled calls, for example, May was 266. Those are responses that were canceled prior to patient contact.
Okay.
Or a call that was called for a standby situation was unfounded, or the patient received a different level of care, or if it wasn't a patient situation, we may have a welfare check.
Sure.
That's a common one, that you get called to a welfare check for an unknown situation. in those situations, law enforcement is typically going in first, not knowing the situation, and then we'll end up being canceled if there's not a medical situation or a need for medical care. So, even with that at 266.
So it's usually first responders that are canceling you, or is it
Yeah.
actual
Yeah.
citizens?
No, it's the great majority of the time it's first responders.
Okay.
You'll anecdotally, we don't have a way to track that, or
Right.
there's nothing in the data set that would do it. I can tell you anecdotally, maybe once or twice in a month, somebody will call for an ambulance and then recant that request or say that they don't believe they need it anymore. That's pretty rare, but even in July it was 300. So it pushes about 10 a day.
Okay.
Any other questions on the clinical side of the data on those letter size sheets? On the response time, end of the world, for each of those months, the left column is total calls, the first column under total calls is total calls within our CAD system in Fargo. Again, that doesn't necessarily take out the transfer non-emergent type calls. The emergent column is what we really focus in on, which is the lights and sirens or immediate threat type call. Very bottom in the yellow box, May was 98.01%, June was 97.2%, and July was 97.23%. There's a handful of exceptions in each of those months, but still well within our 90 or 92% goal.
90.
So well within that 90% range, despite how busy it was, especially in July.
Any questions on that?
And that last final sheet is just the months trended since the time that's always been included, so nothing too terribly different to include there.
It looks as though the data is staying fairly consistent, which it typically does, so thanks for that. Any questions on any of this presented? If not, any other updates anyone has or topics?
We didn't, we kind of knew, but didn't have official notice at the last meeting. And since this isn't a meeting, we'll bring it up again at the meeting. But we did receive the Mission Lifeline Gold Plus Award again for 2019. And so that's a marker of the care that we provide, which is a couple of different components. One is the percent of patients that you get EKGs on that have chest pain, non-traumatic chest pain if they're over 35. It also looks at a measure as far as how often you get that done within 10 minutes of arrival at the patient's side. And then it looks at STEMI patients that go to cath lab to have like a stent or angioplasty, or I call it plumbing work done to open up a vessel. The percent of them that get done within 90 minutes of contact is the national goal. And we're sitting in the high 90s with both of those first two, and the mid 90s with the percent that are open within 90 minutes. Actually, I think it's high 90s. Our average in time in town, if you have a heart attack, you're usually open within 55 to 65 minutes from the time the ambulance gets at your side. So we continue to tout that. It's a great thing for the citizens, working with both facilities to get people in time and open versus what used to be hours when I started in this field. So it's a good thing for the public. I believe there's 2 or 3 in the state that achieved that this year. A lot of people are getting on board, and it's driving some good quality care. So something that we're proud to be able to accomplish.
All right, well done. Anything else anyone has? If not, it's going to be a really, really short meeting, and we don't have to approve, and we don't have to officially adjourn, so.
That's okay. It's summer.
Yeah, so our next scheduled meeting will be November 8th, and at that time, then we'll have to review the May minutes as well as today's minutes and any other approval needs at that time. So
November 8th.
that is November 8th. So thanks all for coming.
Thanks, Desi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.